Good afternoon, fellow flight simmers. Today I'm going to show you how I set up and use ProATC X. I'm going to take you through pretty much everything. This is the latest version. At the moment this is only available to beta testers, but the version you have I think is 1.8.7. I'll take you through it step by step, and we'll start off with the options tab. Then we'll run through the data tab, and then I'm going to set a flight plan from Manchester EGCC to Schiphol EHAM. So let's get started, and we'll see how it goes. This will be split into two parts, because once I've finished talking about the basics of ProATC, I'm going to have to restart the machine and load P3D. So bear with me on that. So there will be a break of about 15 minutes between this part and the live flight. Okay, so let's get started. We'll start off with the options. Right. The first thing you need to know is that depending on what flight sim you're using, and I believe that ProATC will sense which ones you've got, you need to set either P3D or Flight Sim X, Flight Simulator FSX. I've got P3D, so that's what it's set to. Excuse me. Down here we've just got the style that you can set the actual box. So if we want it blue, grey, there's several different colours that you can use, all quite nice. I normally stay in black, so right, so moving across, we've got the language, which obviously depending on which country you come from, you'll set it. You've got three options: German, Spanish or English. I've obviously got it set to English. Right, start with last window position. Depending on what you're doing, you can actually restart the program as you left it, pretty much, and automatically check for updates. I know there are few and far between the updates, but it's handy if saves you keep looking on the website, and they automatically notify you. Right, this slider here, slower PC, this is the crash to desktop. This was added recently, so you adjust this according to the speed of the PC that you're using. Obviously the slower the PC, the further back the slider goes. So I have it set to about 70% for the one I'm using. I don't think, to be honest, any PCs are really fast enough to run P3D and FSX at the moment. Perhaps when P3D goes to 64-bit, but who knows. Okay, so that's the application. Moving on to in-flight. The flight section, this is the recommended setup. Manual descent initialization, top of descent, is your choice. You can set that or not, it's up to you. But basically these settings are the ones recommended, and this one in particular, change assigned approach due to weather AI. Now if you untick this, it means that, and obviously if you're using the weather app, whichever weather app you're using, in my case it's AS 2016, If the wind changes, then and you've already been given a SID and a runway, that could well change if you untick this box, because the weather changes and you will need to ask for a different runway. And that also applies to approach and the star and the landing runway as well. I leave it ticked because, well, you can, it's up to you. Yeah, the other two, insert a vector waypoint, leave that as it is, and obviously download waypoint elevation data if you don't want to fly into mountains, so leave that ticked as well. Right, holding probability doesn't really come into play unless you set the holds, and we'll talk about that in a little while when we get into the data area. Right, you can set the green text that scrolls across the top of the machine. You can set the colour of that to whichever you like, really. There's plenty of choice. I've left it at green, which I think is the default, and you can also set the minimum display time, which is in seconds. So if you want it to scroll slower and last longer, then obviously increase the seconds. I've never used this automatically flight the save the flight situation. I have it on good authority that it does work, but I have never used it, so I can't really comment. But if you want to save the flight, and you can set the interval here, 15 minutes or whatever, and tick that box, and it will save the flight, in this instance, every 15 minutes. Right, co-pilot support. Now, if like me you're using another program called FSFX or something like it, then I never use any of these downwards. So I never use the co-pilot calling out or setting the gear up and down, because that's all done by FSFX. The only ones I leave ticked are contact controllers and confirm instructions, which is what your co-pilot would do, and switch the radio frequencies, again, which is what the co-pilot would do if you were the pilot flying. And that does save a lot of trouble, especially when you get into the simulation and you've got to switch frequencies. Sometimes the frequencies change slightly. Well, if you tick these boxes, that overcomes that pretty much. And the last one on this page is the in-flight key, the keys that you use to interact with ProATC. You can set the different keys in these boxes and then save it, and it will keep the keys you set. Okay, past the folders, pretty explanatory itself, but basically you don't need to touch this. Whichever simulation you set, it should automatically find the paths that you need to the folders. I never set any of these, they set themselves. So as I say, you shouldn't need to worry. Weather, again, whichever weather app you're using. I, as you can see, use Hi-Fi's AS 2016 P3D weather, so you set that accordingly. If you haven't got a weather engine and you're just using, you can also set it to the NOR downloads, so that will download metas and it will give you the correct weather in that instance. Sound, this is a fairly important page. Obviously adjust the volume. If you put this down to 80, you can hardly hear the voices. I find I need it at about 94-95% to hear the voices reasonably clearly. Uh, the next one down, background ATC, you can set this to different time gaps. So if you want every 30 seconds, I'll get a background ATC voice coming. Pilot voices, there are some new voice sets available. If you look around, if you want any info on that, ask me and I'll try and sort it out for you. Try and make sure that the pilot voice that you're using doesn't actually pop up in the AI pilot voices to spoil the realism, as it were. So this is the guy here, so I'll leave him unticked, but the others you can tick as you need. Or not, whichever ones you want. Moving across, other in-flight sounds. Here you can turn on and off the AI communication with, that's basically ProATC talking to your AI traffic. That's quite interesting when you're in flight, because you can actually follow the aircraft that you're passing whilst you're en route, and you can hear the controllers talking to the different aircraft as you pass by them. And authentic background ATC, I'll talk a little bit more about that when we get into the data. And these are the checklists. I don't use these again because I use FSFX, but these can all be edited and etc., and I'll show you that in the data part. And the controllers, obviously you try and keep the controllers different from the pilots if possible. So I've just turned off the 3 US controllers, but I've in pilots, but I've turned them on in controller. So there we go. That's that part. And a lot of people ask me about the pronunciation. Some like it phonetic, others like it pronounced. Well, you've got 3 choices here. You can go the alphabetic one, the phonetic, which is all phonetic, or the alphabetic and phonetic. So the choice is yours. I choose all phonetic, but again, the choice is yours. Map style. This obviously is to taste. You can change all the colours of the countries, the world, the country boundaries, the water, the grid, etc, etc, etc. Not a lot needs to be said about that, except that you can do it. Okay, so we'll move on to the data tab. There's a couple of things I want to show you here. You can add aircraft to ProATC. So if the aircraft is not included, like for instance the Bombardier Q400 was not included, the Dash 8, so I added that myself. And you can do that by new aircraft, etc. You will need some basic info about the aircraft, like the runway lengths, how much tailwind's allowed, crosswind, etc, etc, and its V speeds. And obviously you can, if you've got a checklist or not you want to use with it. That's all pretty straightforward, so we won't dwell on that too long. The next one is the checklists that I mentioned earlier. So you can add checklists, new checklist, you can add a checklist, you can rename checklists, you delete them, and you can edit them. So that's pretty all explanatory. It might be a long job, but to have the checklist read out to you for a specific aircraft that no one else uses is quite a good idea, I think. Again, airlines, some of you fly for virtual airlines, as do I. If you've got an airline that's not listed in ProATC, you can set it here, or you can create one of your own. It's up to you. Or you can edit the existing ones. That's that. Again, that's pretty self-explanatory. SID and star procedures. You can edit all the SIDs and stars. Not that you'd want to, but say EGKK. Now the ones in red, and I'll show you this a little bit further down, are the airports, that the runways that I have shut off. So for instance at Gatwick, they don't use 8 left or 26 right. The runway in use is 26 left and 8 right, and those are the ones that I'm using. So if you wish to alter the SID, oh no, you don't. I'm not sure you can't alter it. You can just see where it is. This part, however, you can. This is where you put your holds in. So if you want to hold, let's say, as an example, you want to stick a hold at Astra. So that hold will be here. You select the heading, so that's your inbound heading, the direction you're going to be turning in the hold, your speed on entry, which is normally about 190, 180, and your entry altitude, which probably be around 7,000, something like that, and your exiting altitude. So you could enter at 7 and exit at 3, or whatever it should be. And you save it, and when you've saved it, that hold will then be available for ProATC to direct you to, should you decide that you want to use holds. Fairly straightforward again. You will need charts to check those, however. This one's very important. Whenever you update or add or remove an airport, you must always run make runways, which reads the scenery and creates a little database. If you're running ProATC on over a network, you will need to run the make runways from the root directory of either P3D or FSFX. If you're running it like I am on the same machine, you can actually run the read scenery on from this point here. And once that's done, you then need to start the import of the AirX cycle which you're using. In this instance, I'm using the latest one, which is 1701. But that must be done every time you add or remove an airport. Moving on. User modified data I've not used and I know very little about, so if you want more info on that, I suggest you go to the PointsOff website. Okay, so we've got the option to create the illusion of ATC for the various countries that you are flying over. So as an example, actually let's take one that I missed. The Czech Republic is set to Germany. Obviously I haven't got any Czech Republic languages. So if you just you don't really want to hear English, so you can pick German or even Russian if you want. But I've chosen a German, so we'll keep it at that. And that's as simple as that. So any country that you wish to. So this is the Netherlands, as it notifies us up here. Assign profile, and you notice it's already set to the Netherlands. France is France, and Spain is España. So that's how you get the countries that you're flying over. Should anyone come across any ATC in various languages, please give me a shout, and if you can, save them, and I'll do my best to work them into this, because we're missing quite a few actually. Italy, and obviously a few of the Arabic countries we haven't got. I know they're all, most ATC is English anyway, but the accent would be nice. Okay, so that's pretty much it for data. We will be able to import new voices eventually. You can do it now. This is for the co-pilot and the controllers and the pilot voice. There's going to be some new recording software, I believe, in the not too distant future, which is going to take care of that. Okay, so the final is to create a flight plan. I'll take you quickly through this tab. So fly now is pretty obvious. You've created a flight plan and you want to fly now, and whichever flight plan you've highlighted is the one that you will be flying. Stop current flight, again highlight it and click that and it stops the flight. Saved flight situations, as I said earlier, I've not used those, so I can't comment on them. The one that we're going to look at now is new flight plan. I've not used these but as you can see, there are various things that you can export to, and obviously copy and paste from. But the way I do it, and again, this is my take on and how I use it, we will now go through. So we're going to create a flight plan from Manchester to Schiphol, and we're going to be flying an Airbus for EasyJet. So the first thing we need to do is select our aircraft. So click on the tab, select Airbus, and it's going to be a 319. And make sure you take note of the minimum runway length required, because the 300, as you can see, is different, and some of the runways that you asked for won't be available. You can change all this in the aircraft tab in data. So if you want to take an A300 off from a grass field, you can change the runway and do so. Anyway, that's the one we're using for this flight, so okay. Now we select so it's EAS, and there you'll see EasyJet pop up. So now all I need to do is get the flight number, and in this case it's 57JT, so 57JT. Just to mention another new, it just makes life easier, everything's now capitalised, so you haven't got to mess about holding down shift or keeping caps lock on. It's all capitalised automatically. So there's the flight number. So now we pick our departure airport, which is EGCC, Echo Golf, click the select button, and you notice, let me do that again, you notice that this only airports matching to the aircraft. If I untick this, I could take off from a grass runway strip if I wanted, and no one would stop me. So now we want to pick a gate, so let's go, let's say gate 16. Pick an alternate which will be Birmingham, EGBB, and our destination airport, which is Schiphol, and that's EHAM. Select that. Now you notice that the gate is auto, and it also gives you a primary alternate. I normally leave that, don't change that. The only exception to that would be if I was flying for Royal Dutch Virtual, where they actually give you all the info that you need, which includes the gate, the alternates, the secondary alternate, etc, etc. So I always tick this, because especially in winter with the weather being quite bad, try flying a visual landing in thick fog and it's not much fun. So I've been given a flight level of 31,000 feet. I will change that, and I've changed that, but now I'm going to undo it, because what I'm going to do now, and this is the way I do it, you can do it however you wish, but flying for VEZ, so Manchester to Amsterdam, if I click fly, it now gives me the route, so I'll copy that. I can now switch this off temporarily, click edit in routing, move that between EGCC and EHAM, right click and paste, and there's the route, and then I just load it into the flight plan, and there we go, that's complete. Now as you can see, it's reset the altitude and the gate, so best bet is to edit your routing first and then set these up afterwards. So it was gate 16 and 31,000. And that, my friends, is how you set up and use ProATC. The second part will start in approximately 15-20 minutes, so I'll see you at Manchester. Bye for now.